Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted about the kind introduction and welcome, but I also want to welcome you here in the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. As a personal representative of the Chancellor for Africa, of the German Chancellor for Africa, allow me to extend also greetings from the German Chancellor as well. Public funds alone, the heading of the speech here for this statement in the beginning of our discussion is building economic bridges to enhance African sustainable development and economic growth. And let me start with remember during my last intervention at the annual ICD, Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. We are speaking here in the Ministry a lot about ICT, information communication technologies. It's a new issue for us to mainstreaming development cooperation in the world and in our programs. The annual ICD Young Leaders Forum on Cultural Diplomacy was in 2011, 3 years ago, you're right. I talked about leadership and partnership with Africa. In my speech, I argued that partnerships, in particular in the private sphere, between civil society and businesses, are central to achieving the important objectives of cultural diplomacy. Today, I would like to go a little bit further and describe some of the concrete partnerships, in particular economic partnerships, that I think have a great potential to make an impact to people's life in Africa. The title of this Symposium of Cultural Diplomacy in Africa talks about this already mentioned economic bridges. I think that such bridges or partnerships are crucial for achieving sustainable and reliable growth in Africa. When we talk about economic growth, bridges between investors and businessmen are particularly important. Yet, for investors to make this effort of building bridges, certain conditions have to be met. Public funds alone, spent under various schemes of development assistance, won't be able to cause sustainable economic growth in Africa and maybe elsewhere. The insight is now well established amongst both African and European partners. In fact, it is even mirrored in the successive naming of development assistance. At first, in the beginning, we talked about aid, then about development, and nowadays it is all about economic cooperation. How this ministry has been called since the beginning more than 50 years ago. This evolution shows that we have come to recognize that economic interests and thus political interests are necessarily involved in any kind of development assistance. And we have finally recognized that it is up to Africans themselves to develop their continent. Nevertheless, there still is a gap between recognition and implementation. Does this mean that any kind of public development assistance is misguided or neglectable? I don't think so. After all, Africans and Europeans alike will only invest in Africa if their investments pay off. We are back to the conditions I talked about before that have to be met for bridges to be built. Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to offer you 3 areas where private investments in Africa have a great potential to enhance economic growth. But only if the specific conditions exist. To provide these conditions is first of all the task of African governments, and in a certain sense also a task for European governments. First, agriculture. One of the most important potential areas for African development is agriculture. Experts estimate that more than 60% of the remaining exploitable areas in agriculture in the world are located in Africa. The biggest challenge for African subsistence farmers will be to transform themselves into small enterprises that can guarantee a secure income and a small margin for profits. Here, investments in technological innovations have a crucial role to play. That means not only machineries, but also how to care for the plants, and what is the stand of the international research in this area. But let me expand a little more on the opportunities for private investments that exist in African agriculture. When I visited the German flour company Red Fox in Ethiopia, I became aware of a very specific potential. Red Fox produces seedlings for plant nurseries all over the world and provides employment to more than 2,000 women in Ethiopia. The CEO told me that the Ethiopian climate allowed producing all year long under the same conditions. According to him, he has never found anywhere on earth such a stable climate. While this story tells us a lot about the opportunities of investing in agriculture in Africa, we should not overlook the difficulties that still exist. Some of the most important challenges that lie ahead include tenure insecurity, environmental degradation, and technological shortcomings. As long as there is no solution to these problems, private companies will remain reluctant to investing in Africa. Hence, government interventions are still needed to tackle these issues and provide the necessary legal and investment framework. Second, natural resources or raw materials. Natural resources, I've told about the land and the land use in Africa, and the climate is also a natural resource, but now it's a little bit more focused on raw materials. A second driver for growth or of growth that I believe will be decisive to the future of Africa. It is wealth of natural resources and raw materials. Resources can, but do not need to be a curse or a problem. What matters is a political will to manage it in a transparent way and distribute it responsibility. Funds For specific purposes, Norway, as an example, also helped to reduce dependency on world market prices. The most important aspects must be regulated at an early stage, if possible, when the licenses are being drafted for the exploration and mining of mineral resources. A positive example is Botswana, or was Botswana, more than 20 years ago, where social and ecological standards at valorum royalties, the financing and use of infrastructure investments have been defined in the contract. The emerging partners and companies operating in the raw material sector are an important partner for development or for developing countries. They need the large-scale investment that they bring along, but they also need to satisfy the population. African governments are increasingly cautious about the deals they strike with global mining companies or global companies in general. They do not want a second scramble for Africa, whereby resources leave the continent without any revenue for the national budget. So far, only parts of North Africa and South Africa, an old mining nation, are exceptions. African governments also realized that they need more information on what kind and how much they have to get into a better bargaining position. Some partners are asking for German support as an honest broker. I have traveled a lot, and I also met a lot of mining ministers, and that was one of the subjects they raised in these meetings. Again, I want to highlight that investments can only flow into Africa if the institutional environment is secure enough, that is, if both African governments and mining companies alike can rely upon the fairness and sustainability with which natural resources are managed. As I pointed out earlier, the deals between the two partners are of utmost importance in this respect. Here again, governments, including development cooperation, have a crucial role to play. Quite often, African governments lack the know-how that is needed to fully appreciate the economic, political, social, environmental, and legal implications of resource contracts. The new CONEX initiative of the G7 aims at supporting African governments or governments of developing countries negotiating such contracts. I am personally involved in developing the CONEX scheme, and I hope that during the German G7 presidency we will be able to move forward together with African governments and companies to provide governments of developing countries as soon as possible with high-level expert teams on the ground during the negotiation process. We have already launched a portal in New York in June at the Columbia University, or the correct name is Columbia Center on Sustainable Development, and the internet portal is negotiationsupport.com, and there are, you can find a list of existing providers for those support, but it's more only an internet portal to get an overview about initiatives. And I think what we really need, or what the process needs, is that there are experts available on the ground for those who want to use it to negotiate on the side of the government, to have the right level or on eye level with the big companies and the lawyers of the private companies. But also the private companies are interested in such an initiative because they all want to get predictability and accountability of their investments and want to know what really will happen. Such an investment in raw material sector means an investment for decades, 30, 50 years, and not every new president should be the temptation to negotiate every contract new is not the best way for the government, but also not a good way for the company and for the local people as well. Third, the last area I want to mention is, I've already mentioned it, the information communication technologies. As a third example, I want to cite an industry that only very recently has started getting the attention it deserves. I am talking about this information and communication technologies, or ICT. The rapid development of mobile telephony shows what is possible when there is a real demand, especially in Africa. In the short term, from 2008 to 2010, the number of mobile phones in Africa nearly doubled. Now I would say there are more than nearly 6 million contracts of cell phones in Africa. And compared to the figure of the inhabitants by 1 billion or 1.1 billion, that is much more than the 30% of Africans. Extreme poverty level is by 1.25 US dollar per day. So you can see they can use a mobile phone, but at that for those prices, it's not possible to do this in Germany and in other countries, even in Southeast Asia and Bangladesh, where the prices are low. But it's a huge potential and widespread over the entire continent. So there is a potential. The explosive growth rates have been achieved almost without any support from development cooperation, powered by African businesses and Africans themselves, like Mo Ibrahim, a Sudanese entrepreneur. Maybe you know, he awards the best funded prize for good governance to former head of states in Africa. His wealth comes from the same mobile telephone company when he sold this company. Technological innovations around the mobile phone, for example, are becoming a driver of change. Mobile telebanking is revolutionizing financial services in Africa. It empowers especially poor people who live in isolated places. In Kenya, 85% of the population owns a mobile phone, compared to 35% who have a bank account. With M-Pesa, which means mobile money in Swahili, 85% Kenyans can receive, send, and save money. They can even pay their energy and water bills, as well as on the supermarket counters. It is needless to say that innovations like these open up a wide range of business opportunities for people, or offer a chance to creating new business models in this kind of new applications, or using information and communication technologies and fast internet. but even more. So with mobile devices, the digital revolution has captured the continent much more rapidly. More than 80% of the mobile phone users log into the internet with their phones. The access of the World Wide Web allows people to access and spread information. It has wide-reaching implication for the democratization of African societies. Experience shows that innovations like the mobile internet, mobile banking, microcredits, and mobile insurance are, especially in Africa, picking up rapidly. However, all these new technologies require a high-speed internet access, which can also be provided within a favorable framework of governance structures. I think this physical infrastructure is more an issue for the private companies. You know, the interest of Google or Facebook to deliver or to build up those high-speed internet access in Africa with balloons or drones or whatever. But on the other hand, it's maybe interesting also for development cooperation to use the new possibilities and the new opportunities to reach people and to do something. Yet private investments only become profitable when the required infrastructure and technology exists in African countries. Germany, with its leading role in technologies, can make a substantial contribution to making Africans benefit from the almost unlimited opportunities of ICT. In this respect, we cannot forget the role of education. That's the main issue. Education has to play, the role that education has to play in modernizing African information and communication capabilities. The Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development has put a focus on education and on the job training in its Africa policies. We are in the beginning, but we are trying to do this much more with support from the government and the minister. It's not only a tool in our programs, it's also about a kind of new goal. To be successful, educational capacities not only have to be improved in terms of quality and quantity, but the right kind of education has to be provided as well. Training young people in areas where there exists a market, as it is the case for ICT, is one of the major challenges ahead. And what I think is that ICT will also create opportunities if there are questions of extreme poor people maybe, and when they find their own answers to those questions. So it's not only about quality and quantity of a tool. ICT, these new technologies also offer new possibilities to reaching goals which were not reachable or was not possible to do this before. So it's an ambivalent or a double approach with new technology. Every new technology offers new opportunities, and not only is a tool for become old goals or to achieve old goals a little bit easier or earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, what I have tried to show you with these three examples is that Africa really is a continent on the move. More and more opportunities for profitable investments in Africa are being realized, be it in the agricultural sector, in the exploitation of natural resources, or in the domain of information and communication technologies. At the same time, we should be cautious to remain realistic. That's my last message, and I think every good politics has to start with looking to the facts and into the realities. Barriers to sustained economic growth and development all over Africa are still enormous and cannot be overcome instantaneously. Therefore, state-led assistance is still required in order to establish conditions where the economy can flourish autonomously. Ultimately, the objective of all development assistance has to be to become superfluous, that is, to abolish itself. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today here in the ministry. Many thanks also to the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. I wish all of us now an interesting and insightful international symposium or discussion about Africa and maybe this three subjects I mentioned in my speech. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much for the very impressive explanation of the strategy here. My name is Tespa Johannes. I work at university in the United States, and this is my second time participating in this very good program organized by. I have two questions. Number one, probably you know Dr. Dambisa Moyo, a Zambian economist. She was asked about agricultural development, as you mentioned, which is the backbone of Africa. However, she said also she criticized the West subsidization of agricultural products where their own United States and Europe, including Germany. How can African farmers flourish and develop with a massive subsidization of farms in Europe and America? Number two, you mentioned three. Agriculture, number one, natural resources, number two, and telecom or information technology. But from my point of view, you can also say we Africans usually give priority to education. When I say education, capacity building. That is the first attention for us. It should be also. Therefore, what can you say about the Bundesministerium Wirtschaftszusammenarbeit Entwicklung program or long-term, short-term strategy in this area? Because we need capacity building, which is very important for us Africans. Thank you.
Okay.
Would you like to respond?
No, we can collect three.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm Dr. Issa Mono from Nigeria. I also teach in the university, the Pan-Atlantic University, Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you for identifying the triangles of Africa's future development. But I think, sir, that there should be a fourth one, which will contain three roles, which I want to talk about. Ethics, a culture of ethics among Africans as a people and their leaders. Otherwise, every other thing that we try to do may again fall into the funnel of corruption, and one quarter would address the problems, three quarters would go elsewhere. Thank you.
Should we take one more?
No, third one.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Wasiolale from Ogun State, Nigeria. First and foremost, I would like to appreciate the organizer of this program, the ICD, and our host, the Chancellor for Africa. GIZ in Ogun State. I know GIZ is a German agency for international cooperation in Nigeria. There is a program going on in Ogun State called SENIM program. So GIZ is partnering with the MSME practitioners in the state. So I am from State Chambers of Commerce. So we form what we call business advocacy group. And what we do is that we are looking at the constraints that are militating against the development of MSME in Ogun State. And also, we are working on what we call cassava value chain, which has something to do with agriculture. Cassava is one of the major staples in Africa. Also, we are working on the enabling environment for MSME to thrive in Nigeria. Presently, the business advocacy group is in 3 states: Niger State, Ogun State, and Plateau State in Nigeria. The GIZ team are doing very well in capacity building training for us in Nigeria. The area we are still looking at is on the financing of this MSME. They are working with what we call a microfinance bank, so that the MSME practitioners can access funds, so that the farmers can access funds to practice in Nigeria. But from my own point of view, we are suggesting to them that they should look at what we are having before, like cooperative societies, using the cooperative people, practitioners, to do capacity building for them, train them, so that they can properly create the fund that they need and then make them to access the fund, so that they can grow their output. And the another area that I know that the German agency is doing very well in Nigeria is about this AHK, dual vocational training. They are training our people, the MSME operators, on industrial mechanics and industrial electronics, and they are doing very well also. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I would like to start with the first question. It's very important. Not only Moyo is saying this, the subsidization of agricultural products in Europe is of course a problem, or in the United States. But I think the main issue is how you can organize and can develop a better regional integration in African countries itself. The market for agricultural products produced in Africa is not Europe or United States. It's much more in Africa itself, in the continent, to for food security and for a better nutrition and better quality of agricultural products in Africa for African countries and the people there. The problem of this subsidized products in Western country is not only that it is difficult to export for the export of agricultural products from Africa to Europe. It's also, every time there's a drought or a famine, the World Food Program is the temptation to use this cheap rice from Japan or corn from the United States. It's a big challenge for those smallholders or farmers and small companies in Africa. They try to produce in Africa from the climate with very, very positive conditions, but with a lack of technology and knowledge that they are destroyed if there is not a better regional integration, a better infrastructure for distribution, products which were produced or which we are Africans are producing in Africa, and so it's the main focus is for me it's the continent itself. That's the first answer. The second answer is the non-tariff barriers, hydrogen, this kind of food protection of all this rules and regulations in Europe that will also or could be also used as a mean for protecting the market, and more or less because of the real need of consumer protection, sometimes only to avoid the competition of products from Africa or other countries in the world. But we have to reduce this subsidization of European farmers, and we are on the way, but of course it's a long way, or it's not as fast as it should be. So that I can agree in a certain sense, and it's the same also for the US market. And the issue is, of course, one of the subjects which must be negotiated between Africa and Europe, also for the economic partnership agreements which the European Union Commission is negotiating with regional economic communities or organizations in Africa. You have heard maybe from ECOWAS and SADC that they have signed. The problem now is that for the access to the European market, there is no barrier. Now everything can be produced in Africa, and for consumers in Europe, but for middle-income countries, and that means, for instance, flowers from Kenya or beef from Namibia, the WTO rules are, the rules have to be changed because of this. Access is only for LDC countries, for the least developed countries, and not for the middle-income countries. And so there is a need for a new framework, and all this is merged with negotiations of TTIP, the free trade agreement between United States and Europe. So it's a trade issues and trade negotiations are very complex, and you have heard the last agreement in Bali of the WTO in December last year was not as successful as it was celebrated 7 months ago, because of India has not agreed, and the African countries also have raised some problems. I'm not an expert in this area, but I know that every side has to do their own homework, and that means, of course, also the Europeans. But in the end, there's a big market in Africa, and the people there and the communities there are interested in good food, in sufficient supply of food. And that's a big business for Africans and smallholders, farmers in Africa. And it is easier to build up a factory. You mentioned the processing of food, the value chain. It's much easier to produce sausages or some processed food in Africa if there's a bigger market. It's not the 170 inhabitants in Nigeria is a big market. But most of the countries in Africa, more than 50% are smaller than 10 million inhabitants. And you have to organize this regional integration inside the communities. And I think the best way is if this process started from bottom up. It has to start from the bottom up, and there are five countries in East Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda. They have already created a free trade zone, and you can produce in Dar es Salaam for the fifth countries, and also you can produce in Bujumbura for the five countries. And it's a bigger market, and that also is a main issue. In my opinion, it's maybe the most important issue to attract companies and to create new industrial sites in Africa where processing or production will take place. And you mentioned also education. I mentioned 3 subjects, and education is an issue for all the 3. Agriculture know-how. The ministry has some initiatives of the ministry and of our new Minister for Development Cooperation, Gerd Müller, are very specific to implement our agricultural programs. And one of the initiative is to build up at least 10 green innovation centers for agricultural innovation, knowledge and know-how transfer to African countries. And that means education in the end, to come up with vocational training, to come up with researchers and to use Western know-how and support this knowledge transfer by the ministry and with money from the German taxpayers and from European programs. Dr. Momo from Nigeria, it's an interesting issue. If you understood you correctly, corruption is of course an issue for everyone in every country in the world, but it's sometimes it seems it's really endemic in Africa. And that is one of the obstacles for Western companies. Maybe you know not only the German implementation agency of our ministry, GIZ, German International Corporation. Maybe you also know an old construction company in Nigeria, Julius Berger, which was owned, or the chairs of Julius Berger. I think a few years ago it was 49% of the chairs were held by Bill Fingerberger, the German construction company. And the former CEO, Roland Koch, Prime Minister of Hesse, reduced the shares under 25%. And the reason for this reducing or this decision was that the company, Bill Fingerberger, is active in every part in the world, in Europe, in North America, and listed at a stock exchange. And the compliance issues in the United States are very strong. And if there is a kind of involvement with 49% in the business in Nigeria, where only one company is able to do something for the government and no competition will take place in Lagos, for instance. So that is a problem for the market and the business in other parts of the world. So this kind of interlinkages are very important, and you have to be aware of it. It's in your own interest to overcome this, that every company can also operate in in Africa as in other parts in the world. But sometimes I know it's difficult and it will take a little bit longer than we all want to see it. The main issue for businessmen is to know. Businessman means not only to want to sell something, to sell Porsche or Mercedes in Lagos is the same as in Stuttgart or Berlin. That's not a really innovative business, but to bring money, to invest private money in African countries. That's what really is important, not only to sell something for the rich people or the elite in a country. To invest, the main issue is the return of investment and the predictability and the accountability of the investment. That means the framework, but also the trust between people, personal relationship, all those are very important. And I think also German businessmen can deal with this, but it's easier for companies, Chinese companies, state-owned companies from China, coming with a lot of money. There's also a different situation for those companies at home. China is a big economy, huge, and the liquidity of the currency is by 4 trillion US dollars, and there's a lot of money, and they can use a certain percentage of this money also as risk money for Africa, for geopolitics and so on. It's not only real business like an SME from a small state of Bavaria or Baden-Württemberg in Germany can do it. There's also a different, and you have to acknowledge this, or we have to recognize this. The last intervention, I've heard that GIZ is doing something right. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, and I'm very appreciate about this, and the issue of value chain and what you mentioned, the financing, vocational training, all this, it's also in the focus of our development programs. I mentioned the issues, and maybe I should say ICT is linked here in the ministry with education. It's the same department where we are dealing with educational issues and the digital world. And I think the main area for a government or for state policy and using taxpayers' money in using the new technologies is education, and to find a new way with social media, with interactive learning programs, so that really this kind of education can make a difference. And it's for me it's incredible that a young student in Africa can use the same information as a Harvard professor in the United States, and so the opportunities are huge. But maybe I've learned, or in 6 weeks ago I was in New York and had a meeting with a man at from the Rockefeller Foundation, dealing with ICT issues and development programs in Africa and developing countries. And he said an interesting sentence: new technologies like information communication technologies, in the beginning there is an estimation and too much enthusiasm, because regarding the change it will make, and in the end the change is much more bigger than we have expected in the long run. So that's maybe interesting. There was a hype, and not so much has changed already, but in the end, the potential is huge. And now it's just the time to come into the process and yeah, to trigger it. Thank you.
My name is Princess, and I'm from France, but I have an origin from Nigeria. Actually, I would like to talk about what the professor from the US said, actually, but there's a comment I would like to point at something that we all know that the African problem actually are the foreign investors. Everybody knows this. So when it comes to corruption, we have to understand that this problem of corruption comes actually from the foreign investors. Because when the foreign investors, I mean, they have to do with the business, they have to do with the government. So when we have a corrupt, today in Nigeria, we have a corrupted government because we have they working hand in hand with the foreign investors. Like now we have lots of China, we have China now working hand in hand with the Nigerian government, with the rail stations. So when we're talking about corruptions, like the epidemic of corruptions in Nigeria, I mean in Africa, then we should not forget that the Western investors are the cause of this. Because why I'm saying this actually is, I remember Nigeria used to be an agricultural country. Nigeria was so good in agriculture. I mean, I can give this testimony that my grandfather was very good in cocoa. He was a cocoa farmer. And then when you go into cocoa, that means you usually have the money. And then suddenly the discovery of oil and everything changed in Nigeria. Today, agriculture is not as it used to be, the way it used to be in Nigeria anymore. Everybody wants to invest in petroleum now because that's where they think the money is. And who discovered that the Nigerian, who came into the Western investors? So when we're talking about corruptions, I think we should not forget the Western investors because they were the one that instigated all this from the beginning. So African leaders, if we move out to the foreign investors, I'm telling you, these African leaders, everything will change. So to tackle the issue of corruption, we have to focus on the issue of Western investors because they were the one that the root cause of all this problem. That's one thing. And this, concerning education that the professor said, I think he's absolutely right because I can tell you that you are bringing your system, you are bringing your own project to Africa. Maybe for instance, Nigeria, it only gets to only 5% of women. And these are women that live maybe in Lagos, maybe in the well-influenced areas. But I can tell you that in Lagos, I was in Lagos 10 days ago, and I can tell you that the majority of women are not educated. Even when they studied, they went to school, they had education before war of a classroom, but they are not educated. I can tell you that many women don't even know how to operate an iPad. So when we're talking about ICT, I think we have a big problem here because many people don't even know anything about that. They were not really educated. They don't even know how to handle a computer. And for instance, I can tell you, yes, we have the proliferation of distribution of cell phone and everything, the mobile phone, good. But I can tell you, only 5% of women, maybe in Ikeja or Detroit or maybe Koyi or Lekki, as in the area of Lagos, that have access to that. But when you come to Agege, and you come to another area in Lagos, I can tell you women, they went to school, yes, but they are limited to so many things. So what is education to them? They can't even read half of the book they went to. They studied. So for me, that is not education. Education has to be with a combination, not just of the theory, but the practical aspect of everything. And I can tell you that if you're coming to Africa with your project, then you have to think about those people. Otherwise, it's not complete. I'm sorry.
Okay. Regarding corruption, I think I do not agree. One of the example was what I tried to explain with Julius Berger and Biffinger-Berger. The German industry is interested, the export-oriented industry is interested in selling products, and 1 or 2% more or less growth in China is much more important for the German economy than to sell some products in Africa or to invest in Africa. So that's very only to communicate the fact. So that there is not really a need for the Western companies to come to Africa for their current business. That means it could be a mistake to come too late. The German companies, after the wall came down in 19 89, and after reunification in 1990, they were very early went to Russia. And the German companies were very engaged and aggressive in the Russian market, and in the end, few oligarchs were successful, and the German companies lost a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. No one has spoken about this from the businessmen in Germany in the early 1990s. So, and maybe that it's a traumata for those people to come too early. It could be right that now they will come too late to Africa, but in the end, the current successful economy in Germany, there are many reasons. SMEs, the very skilled, educated people in Germany. There's a long tradition over centuries of craftsmen and small and medium-sized enterprises, but also, of course, the big business in China and Southeast Asia, and so there are many reasons for the current situation. The main point is industrial production in Germany has taken place over the decades after World War II, and that is different to only gain money from the finance market in London, or it's also different from France, where more or less big companies playing the important role, and SMEs are not so important as in Germany, Austria, or North Italy. So that there's the structure of the industry, of services, so that's really an interesting issue. And my question to you is, who is responsible for educating the people? The former colonial power, or who is doing this business? It's in responsibility of the people in Nigeria. The governors are very strong. I've seen the oil pollution in the Delta states, and of course it's an issue for Shell, but Shell is willing to invest some billions of dollars for redevelopment of areas. But the current oil company is owned by the Nigerian state, by the federal state. The main shares, the majority of the shares is by the state. And if the finance minister Nyosi is said to me, we need the money, so we can't invest. So, but who is responsible for doing better business in the oil sector in Nigeria? It's of course the government and the governors, and it's of course an incredible situation in a country like Nigeria, where oil is produced. We have oil production. Over the last oil has been produced over the last 50 years in Nigeria. And of 3 or 4 refineries in Nigeria are there, but no one is really operating very well. And the crude oil is going out, and the petrol is coming in, and everyone is paying for the chips coming out and for the chips coming in, and the elite in the Delta states and at the federal level, they all gain money from the current situation, and no one is interested to change the situation and to have the petroleum bill in the parliament. So I know that the situation a little bit better in Nigeria, and the gas flaring. You want to electrify the whole country, and you have turbines and gas turbines there, but no pipeline to use the gas from the oil production for this electricity production. It's flaring, and the greenhouse gases which were emitted by gas flaring in Nigeria is more than all the greenhouse gases which are emitted by transport and industry in Nigeria. So it's incredible. But the situation must be changed by the government, and the responsibility is in Nigeria itself. But we also have to support or carry our responsibility, and I can speak about this, but I can not solve from this ministry or from the German government or from the German taxpayers the problems in Nigeria. So we have to put pressure on the right people there. Sorry for that. Mm-hmm.
This is initially from South Africa and then it's spread out around Africa. Yeah. I'm also teaching at the African University of Science and Technology in Abuja. Mm-hmm. So then in terms of capacity buildings, we are a little bit contributing in that direction, and professors are coming also from all around the world in order to contribute in that way. So I would like also to join others to thank you very much for this precise talk, because I think I have followed it step by step, and I really like it very much. And I also love the advice you gave us in the end, specifically saying that we have to be realistic, because I think we have to go a little bit beyond the speculation and try to be realistic and try to do something. I also like the fact that you said we have to not just African countries just to receive money, but they have to. You as Western countries have also to make concrete actions in Africa, bringing the money and then trying to do something very, very specific. My question is, I wanted to know precisely what specific actions the ministry is actually doing in Africa. You already kind of answered partly this question in the sense that you are also contributing to the capacity buildings in Africa, but do you have other concrete actions like that can help, for instance, the African from the diaspora to also contribute to Africa, because I know this by experience it's really difficult for them when they don't have any contact or they don't have any support to settle down, to transfer the technology to back home. And they are not even encouraged to return home. Although they do have a lot of capability, they do have a lot of know-how to doing this. So I really wanted to know whether in the ministry there is a specific program that can help doing this. If there is not, probably if you think. Thank you so much.
Yeah, maybe I raised the 3 issues or subjects, and I haven't explained the different initiatives and programs. It's a little bit boring if I would read the different initiatives about youth partnerships of universities, partnerships of civil society, parishes or sport clubs, building football grounds in Africa, and using our new World Championship. So for coming up with good ideas in African soccer schools or whatever. So there are a lot of very concrete initiatives, but in general you also can say more than 50% of the entire money of the ministry in bilateral development cooperation is spent for sub-Saharan Africa. So that's a lot of money. And Africa is in the focus of the minister himself, but for the ministry, and there are also other ministries with initiatives in the area of mitigation and adoption of climate change issues in the environmental ministry for environmental affairs, but also in the area of science and education. What you mentioned, the African Institutes for Mathematical Sciences in Cape Town or Mozambique and in Cameroon, the last one was launched in January, February. So, and I'm a little bit involved in all these different initiatives. I hope that this will be successful, of course. There's one in Ghana, one in Senegal. So at all levels, primary schools, secondary schools, vocational training, universities, postdoc scholarships, and we are active at all levels, and education, of course, it's a key issue not only for our ministry but for several ministries here. Even if you look at the Ministry for Internal Affairs, the training of policemen and also the training of people in the army, what we are doing in Mali and in many other countries. For African governments, that they can use the army and the new technologies and weapons and solve their own problems themselves. The other concrete issue is what I mentioned. There are 3 special programs with the new coalition and the new minister here. One is One World, No Hunger. That is about agricultural issues, what I have mentioned. This is Green Center for Innovation and Knowledge Transfer to speak about and to tackle the issue of migration, to combat the reasons of migrations, why people, men, women, have to leave their countries, or why they have left countries and coming to Europe and want to earn money only in the Western states. So that's in general, it's an issue of development cooperation to create prosperity and economic reliable growth in the countries itself. And the third one is about climate and the new post-2015 agenda. I mentioned that Germany took over the presidency of the G7, and next year is our regular presidency, 2015, and 2015 is a very specific year for development because of the end of the Millennium Development Goals. We have to balance this program. I think very successful, but not successful enough to reach all the development goals, old development goals. And you know, in New York there's an open working group speaking about sustainable development goals for the post-2015 agenda. And that's also an issue to give input from the ministry. There's a process about future programs and the involvement of the civil society in Germany and Europe. And the best way is to look at our internet homepages here of the ministry. You can find it in English and French, and maybe it's much easier maybe to understand if I try to explain everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Fatma Malik from Sudan, and the legal advisor of the National Bank of Egypt, Khartoum. Do you agree with me, Your Excellency, that what we need is to raise awareness among our people in Africa in relation to the problems, whether financial or political or economic? I'll give you one of the major problems in Africa. It is the illicit financial flows from Africa. You know, this problem is only known by educated people, and they discuss it in close the condition holds. But people, they do not know anything about this. We need to raise the awareness of our people to these problems, to share responsibility and to participate in solving our problems. Thank you.
I agree, and you're very, very polite of you that financial flows, sometimes, of course, the interesting issue is illicit financial flows from Africa to Western countries. And what I mentioned with the CONNEX initiative to support negotiation, raw material contract negotiations, for instance, it's also about to create ad valorem royalties that the revenue for the national budget or tax administration, that yeah, you can gain or earn the benefits from the natural resources. But you also said the realistic approach means for me the situation in the world is very, very complex, and the mining companies are in favor to go to Latin America, to Central Asia, to African countries. So the gambling is a big it's a big game, and the competition is not so much between the companies, it's much more between the presidents of the African countries, for instance. And so we have to be realistic, and to get a deal means to find out what is possible, that the company is coming, and the profits and the risks are shared by the government and by the companies. It's a difficult business to bring $5-6 billion US investment in the middle of the continent. So for a nickel mine, and it's not easy to process nickel in Burundi, where there's no infrastructure, and the capacity for processing nickel in the world is only 50 or 60% used, and free capacities in Latin America and in Hamburg or wherever are available, so that transport is cheap. So realistic is a right word, but it's difficult, and sometimes it's yeah, we have to acknowledge the facts. But of course, the financial flows and also between different institutions and private sector, public sector, that's really important.